Rabbi Daniel Cohen is rabbi at Congregation Agudath Shalom in Stamford, Connecticut, the largest modern Orthodox synagogue in New England. But for Rabbi Cohen, large doesn't have to mean it's not welcoming.
We're not looking to create a synagogue in our own image. We want to create it in God's image. And in God's image, everybody's welcome.
Rabbi Cohen is a person who's on a mission.
On a personal level, I've always thought about really trying to make the most of every day.
He's learned from some of the best Darshanim and orators of this generation.
One of the things Rabbi Kenny Hayne, who was a mentor early on, this is like a vivid memory from my fourth year of homiletics. He said, your opening was good. The main part was good. And then you forgot to land. You're just like floating up there. You didn't bring it home.
In this episode, we talk about how to decide what to talk about each Shabbos. And what if your message doesn't necessarily fit into the Parsha?
Sometimes the text of the Torah is your primary text, and sometimes it's a pretext.
What if your heart is not 100% aligned with your message? Should you still say it?
And I believe strongly, if it doesn't come from my heart, if I don't believe in it, I'm not going to say it. I'm not there just to give Torah. I mean, they could open up a book and find Torah. Get something on the internet. That's not my role.
An ingenious way to get people to turn off their phones while you're speaking.
If he's turning his phone off, maybe I should turn my phone off.
How to strike the right balance between the head and the heart in your talk.
So I can give one source and delve into a little bit, but then immediately pivot to the story and inspiration of the strategy. It's a way for people to feel they're getting both.
And how to tell stories and where to place them in your drasha for maximum effect.
There could be a punchline in a story, and don't waste it. Like, think about where you're going to use it in your drasha so it has the most impact.
I learned so much from my interview with Rabbi Daniel Cohen, and I'm sure you will too. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Daniel Cohen.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon. Are you in Israel?
No, actually, no. I'm in Stamford, Connecticut.
I saw you were rabbi in West Orange for a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I was. That's where I started out, actually.
Yeah.
West Orange connection?
A little bit. We have some friends who live in Livingston. We've enjoyed Poppy's Bagels over the years, and yeah. So tell me a little about the Kehillah. You say it's the biggest modern Orthodox synagogue in New England?
Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't come up with that. That was even here before I got here. But I would say it's a bit of a throwback synagogue. It's really exploded in the past couple of years in terms of the amount of young people that have moved here and the amount of more observant people that moved here. But the shul was founded actually in 1889, very long history in the late 19th century, moved a few locations, but it's always had its roots as an anchor in Orthodoxy with wide open doors. You know, we're proud of the fact that we have a parking lot that's open. We don't look to close it. We don't care how people get here. So you have people that are here on Shabbat morning. You can have 400 plus people here on a Shabbat morning between potentially five different services, 400 to 500 people. And then on the holidays, you can have, 1,500 to 2,000 people here. But the fact that they still are affiliating with a shul that may not necessarily, from a value standpoint, they align with it. But from an observance standpoint, they want to be part of something authentic. Thank God over the years, and we continue to cultivate what I call just a very inclusive, tolerant, open pathway with many gateways for connection. So I love it. I grew up in Atlanta. My wife grew up in Charleston. At times when, at the end of the day, we have a mission to bring the joy of Judaism to people beyond those that are like us. And, I always encourage rabbis to think about their shuls and congregants. We're not looking to create a synagogue in our own image. We want to create it in God's image. And in God's image, everybody's welcome. So I think, the synagogue is just a great model for the kind of orthodoxy that needs to continue to flourish in America and beyond.
Amazing. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what the drasha slot represents to you when you get up to speak. What is that? What are your goals? What do you hope to achieve during that time? What's your purpose?
So my purpose is to give people an easy idea, a takeaway, to inspire them, to give them a new way maybe of looking at an issue or a text, it's really important, at least before I get up to speak, that I ask myself, what do I want them to remember? And then everything fits into that model. I'll speak depending upon the davening. We have multiple services here. So our 7 and 8 o'clock are a little more streamlined. Our 9 o'clock in the main sanctuary is just a little more, a lot more people. And, I try to speak 5-10 minutes, maybe 10-15 max. Obviously try to, a lamb of blessed memory would basically say you have 30 seconds to capture their attention. So you gotta and I don't believe in starting with a joke. I mean, you just want to hit them and get them to think about something which is either counterintuitive or a question or something going on that is in their hearts. And then try to develop whatever that question is. I think it's important also to give them a text. It doesn't have to be a long text, but something they can say, you know what? There's a word in the Parsha that now I have a better understanding of and how it applies to my life. I don't want to leave the Drasha without them thinking about what this means for their life. At the end of the day, the Torah is an Eitz Chaim He. So if I can give them a brief thought with some development and application to their life in which they're feeling that I really spoke to their hearts or their minds, that leaves them thinking about something, then I feel it's, successful. So I kind of try to, I would say, like I do in the book, reverse engineer the Dvar Torah. It's easy to have things to say. I mean, and I learned that over time. I mean, sometimes, I have a good Dvar Torah, but 50% of it is how are you delivering it and how are they receiving it? Anybody can get up and just quote from a Gemara and just say, I heard a good Vort, but to really connect with people is definitely an art.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you say you won't open necessarily with a joke, give me an example of a strong opening that you would do to strike in the hearts of, you don't have to actually perform
Well,
it.
I
I'm
mean,
just curious.
first of all, I always start. I think it's really important just to be warm. Want to wish you good Shabbos. I actually don't think it's a good idea just to get up there and shake them, just get them relaxed a little bit. I think the pauses are really important. Less is more. Sometimes I've gone over a drush in my head for many times, but for them, this is the first time that they're hearing it. So I need to allow them time to process it. So I like to try to capture them with a question. I mean, a number of weeks ago, this kind of idea really was very meaningful, especially in the time that we're living. Classic question that's asked is I don't understand. We're reading about all of the children that are born, and why does Leah wait till the fourth child to say thank you? And why does the Talmud say there was nobody who ever gave gratitude to God before she did? What does that mean? Adam never gave gratitude. Abraham never gave gratitude. I don't want them to think about it and develop that. And I forget, I think it was from a Rabbi Shai Held, actually, who writes well. He says she was the first person who understood that even when your life isn't perfect, you still have to say thank you. For the first 3 children, she was always hoping that the birth of the child was going to bring her closer to her husband. But then at the 4th child, she says, you know what? It's never going to be the way that I want with my husband, but that doesn't mean I can't say thank you. And that's the reality in the world in which we're living today. The world isn't perfect, but that doesn't mean we can't celebrate. That doesn't mean we can't, and I think a lot of people are struggling with that today. How do you carry both simultaneously? Rabbi Doron Peretz, I heard him speak on him. She may have heard, his 2 sons, one who's I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago, one who's a hostage currently, and the other who was wounded in his leg, and by the grace of God, the bullet missed 1 centimeter from a major aortic in his leg, and he survived. The doctor said 1 centimeter. So that son who was survived was going to get married, and he was dealt with the question, do I celebrate my son's wedding while another son is being held hostage? And he decided to do it because he said life comes in packages. And that's a really important message. So I make it from the heart, give people a text, and it gives people chizuk.
Yeah. How do you decide what to talk about? What's your process?
It's interesting because in one of my earliest classes in homiletics with Rabbi Haskell Lookstein, my father had Rabbi Joseph Lookstein. I don't know if there's a Lookstein teaching still anymore, but he said sometimes the text of the Torah is your primary text, and sometimes it's a pretext. In other words, it's not necessarily the essence of it. So for me, and I never understood, Rabbi Haskell Lookstein would say that either his father would always think about the Drasha as soon as he came home from shul on Saturday night. It's like he was thinking about for a week. So as a smicha student, as a rabbi, I said, what? Like he's thinking about it like all week. And now I understand, which is like my eyes are open, my ears are open. I'm thinking about like what I'm hearing from people, what issues are on their minds. And it works different ways. I mean, sometimes if I have a really great conversation with somebody or like a very inspiring moment, I'll put it in the back of my head. It could be on a Sunday or Monday. And I say, this is something that I want to share with the congregation on Shabbos. And then I'll find a text in the Torah that week that's a pretext. Or I may just be learning during the week and say, wow. Like this week, I saw something which I thought was kind of like a wow Devar Torah and very related, the whole concept about, again, the chamushim. There's a lot of conversations about what in the world chamushim means. So, one idea that I heard Rabbi Shalom Rosner quote, I think the Be'er Yosef in his Sefer, where he says that, what does it mean? Because he quotes like the Yonas and Ben Uziel and others that people came out with 5 children. It's like a very odd idea. So he basically explains that the people that died during Choshech were only the adults. And there were all these orphans. And what happened was people came out each with 5 families. Like one family took care of 4 families' orphans. So he says when they left Egypt, the great chesed was that the Jewish people cared for other people's children, while they were leaving. And that's the way redemption happens. And that's what's happening in Israel today, with the soldiers. And how are we thinking about other families and stuff like that? So I was moved by that. I may use it. So it just depends on how my week is going and what I also say, and I believe strongly, if it doesn't come from my heart, if I don't believe in it, I'm not going to say it. I'm not there just to give Torah. I mean, they could open up a book and find Torah, get something on the internet. That's not my role.
Have you ever not felt it and just said, I'm not speaking this week? Is that ever happened?
On a rare occasion, if I felt like I wasn't, like my head wasn't there, my heart wasn't there, it happens rarely. Because look, at the end of the day, people want a Devar Torah, so I just really try to dig. And I would say it's very much min hashamayim. I mean, my mom passed away many years ago, but I could actually go into Shabbos. I don't recommend this necessarily, but I can have an idea of what I'm going to talk about. And then something literally may stir in my soul on a Friday night or early, and I'll shift it a little bit because that's where my heart's at. So I have done that on occasion. It doesn't happen often. But it's a rare occasion that if I really feel I don't have anything to say, like I won't do it. But usually I'll find something. And again, it's not about the length. People just appreciate something that means something to them. But I find if I end up speaking and don't use that role, like it's flat. It just doesn't go. So I'd rather not speak.
Yeah. You mentioned about how you often will go over the sermon in your head a bunch of times. Is that, do you rehearse? Do you write? How do you speak and how do you prepare?
So generally, like Yom Noraim are very different. When it comes to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because I print a lot of that stuff up and I send it out to a lot of people. My wife, we joke about it because I have friends that will prepare. Like I had a rabbi once that said, it's middle of July. I already wrote my Rosh Hashanah sermon. I can't even deal with it because then it's no summer. Like as soon as I don't know if it was, as soon as the shofar blows, it blows for thee. It's from some poem. The point is when the shofar starts to sound and I'm in Elul mode, I can do it. And I really, I try to write it down. So that's something that I actually have written, not reading it, but I have all things written down. On a general basis, usually what I'll try to do is I'll make a little outline for myself, just a couple like, beginning, middle, end. What are the points? I might write something up on a little like Google Doc. So just in my head, I have it organized. And then I don't have anything written up per se, but I'll have a couple sheets that might be a source or two that I'm going to rely upon, and then I'll go up and speak. So
Got
it's
it.
notes really. Or even an outline is really what it is on a regular Shabbos.
And when you say that you need to know ahead of time what you want them to take away, is it always one thing or is it ever more than one thing?
Um, I'm a big believer that it's like one thing. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't like branches to it. It doesn't mean there are pieces. But like sometimes I've seen people can get lost. Like if you put too much out there, like all they remember is look, a story could be very inspiring. And if they remember the story, that's great. But sometimes they'll remember like all the, tangential stuff and not the main stuff. I want them to be able to say, like, what did the rabbi talk about? And if they can't summarize it in 30 seconds, like here's the basic idea. I think that again, it doesn't mean there isn't more to it or a minute, but I want them to have one main idea. Again, I think for every rabbi, you got to have a strong support. My wife is excellent. I don't, other than the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, I'm not like running through what I'm going to talk about per se, but we talk about different things. And, one of the things Rabbi Kenny Hayne, who was a mentor early on, this is like a vivid memory from my fourth year of homiletics. He said, your opening was good. The main part was good. And then you forgot to land. You're just like floating up there. You didn't bring it home. And if you don't bring it home, like people will forget everything. They're going to lose interest. So my wife will sometimes say to me like this, land.
That's funny. Tell me about some of your other influences and inspirations for speaking.
I would say that, it's interesting. I mean, definitely, I don't write things up like Rabbi Lookstein writes them up, but he's always been a model for structuring a sermon, in terms of he's pretty captivating, and thank God he should live and be well for many years. But he's able to bring people in. He has a pretty strong sense of what the structure should be. It doesn't always have to be threes, but he's very big into threes. And making it relevant and talking from the heart. I've always seen him as a real model for me. I would say, I mean, Rabbi Sachs, I do read a lot. I think for a lot of people, his ability, that's okay. Jonathan Sachs, of course, a blessed memory. His ability to really get to the heart of a matter and make Torah relevant for people from a philosophical standpoint is very inspiring. Different pastors, actually. When I was growing up, I used to watch. There was a show. I grew up in Atlanta. You didn't have too many stations back then. It was called The Hour of Power. You heard of that?
I have, yeah.
By Robert Schuller. He had the Crystal Cathedral. But just, the idea to really captivate people in a way that's very colloquial. In other words, just you're talking to people. I think that's important. You're not like standing up there and just like giving a Devar Torah. You're having a conversation with people. People need to feel that you're talking to them. Zig Ziglar, I mean, he's a strong influence as a motivational speaker over the years. I don't know. It's like funny. It's like everybody develops their own style, but I grew up a lot. My father was very into like motivational speaking when I was growing up. So I would listen to Zig Ziglar tapes a lot, and I was just very into Rick Warren, another fellow, John Maxwell. He's done a lot of leadership stuff. I mean, I take from everywhere. It's not like I think everyone has to develop their own style, but I would say that. I don't know, those are some of the people I'm always interested. Look, I don't really have a chance these days to listen to too many other people, other than obviously on the internet or YouTube and stuff like that. But I'm pretty busy at my own shul per se. But those are some of the early influences. I'll tell you, look, Rabbi J.J. Schachter is a master, particularly when it comes to shiurim. I mean, I've always been captivated by the way that he's developed things, and also has his finger on the pulse of different issues that people are struggling with. He's very authentic, and I say his heartfelt way in which he takes a significant Torah text, develops it, but really speaks to the soul to me has been very helpful.
Yeah. So I'm curious how you branched out into motivational speaking, keynote presentations. At what point did that occur in your career?
So most of it really related to once I published a book. I mean, it wasn't about, okay, I decided I'm going to publish a book. I never really thought I was actually going to write meaningfully like a book. Like someone said to me, "You're going to write a book." It just like didn't even cross my mind. But it was kind of a pivotal moment, I guess. I mean, just going back a little bit, when I was at a conference, it was with rabbis of different denominations. It might have been this program called From Good to Great. I'm not really sure, but um, we got to a conference hotel in Philadelphia, and the first thing they said to us is, "We want you to go to your room by yourself for the next 2 hours, and we want you to draw on a big piece of paper your past, your present, and your future." And I write about this actually in my book, that it was a moment when I kind of took myself out of myself a little bit, thought about my connection to Sinai and family and who I am, but also realizing in a certain way that I wanted to amplify more of the light within myself beyond just like the shul piece, and just beyond, not that it's not meaningful, it's very meaningful. It's all about relationships, but it got me thinking about the notion of how can I dig deeper into my potential to spread God's light in the world. And it led to this other idea of thinking about, okay, what I want to write about. And on a personal level, I've always thought about really trying to make the most of every day and leading kind of your best life. My mother of blessed memory, my father, were very mission driven and very warm, very joyful, very grateful, and just really kind of honed into me that life matters and that I have to find a way to live life to its fullest. And then when my mom passed away at 44, obviously my whole life turned upside down, and I never appreciated the fragility of life, that life can change in an instant. And then that led me, when I turned to the same age as my mom, that was the key point, when I asked myself, am I doing the most with my life? My mom died at 44, that I could do, and I wanted to help other people think about how do they kind of lead their best life. So what happened was I actually went through about 100 plus eulogies that I wrote to try to distill like what is the essence of a best life. And then a friend of mine said, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to help people reverse engineer their lives. It doesn't take a lot of greatness for somebody walking out of a funeral or out of a hospital to realize that they need to hug their children a little bit tighter and to be grateful for everything that they have. The question is, how do we lead that life on a regular basis? So I developed this idea of helping people identify the best version of themselves. And then I take them on a journey of 7 principles to reverse engineer their lives so they lead their lives now for how they want to be remembered. And that quest of every human being to really make the most of every day and to focus on not what is urgent and what is important is a yearning that everybody has. And that kind of led to, I wrote the book. It led to this notion of I speak about leading a life of legacy. And then it branched into non-Jewish places. So I've spoken for like endowments or companies or financial planning, because at the end of the day, the theme is a universal one. And as I'll leave you with this, the Ramchal says at the very beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, I'm just here to remind people the obvious. You know what I'm saying? But most of us forget the obvious. So it's kind of led into that whole realm. And then that led into, I have this radio show with a reverend that I do that's on, a bunch of markets all over the country. And I wrote a fiction book related to that, and just different things that I do to continue to try to expand it out. So then I transformed the book into an academy. So that's something that I'm doing right now. I work with people all over the world. But yeah, everyone wants some motivation and wants to know that their life makes a difference. I mean, and when you wake up in the morning and you realize that, it's not only about you believing in God, but that God believes in you and you have something to accomplish in the world that's different than anybody else in the world. It's a very empowering, uplifting message for people to embark on their day.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, they say that a speaker may have thousands of speeches, but ultimately it boils down to just several messages. that they speak about over and over and over again. And do you find that's the case with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, they said that about, by the way, I have to say, another influence has been Rabbi Riskin. He should live and be well. No question that we have a very nice relationship. I mean, now, unfortunately, he's not doing so well. He should have a refuah shalema, but I developed a nice relationship with him over the years, and I've always felt that when he got up to speak, he captivated, he was substantive, he was inspiring, very, very, very real, and really encouraged people to take responsibility in terms of the destiny of the Jewish people. But somebody said, I think he once said, look, I got 5 or 6 topics I talk about. Those are my big themes. How they are, packaged is going to be different depending upon other stuff. But I would say yes. One of the challenges I think for any speaker, for me, is like to get off the comfort zone. It's like people do associate, like when I speak, like, I have certain general messages, but I can't be held captive to them. It's not like I'm not going to speak about other things on different occasions. But yeah, there are certain basic things that I think are important for us to focus on. So inevitably, my speeches revolve around those 4 or 5 themes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious also, now you have a pulpit where the audience knows you, the congregation, you're their leader, and you develop that connection with them week in, week out. You're caring for them in pastoral type of ways. How do you approach connecting with an audience when you step into a place where they're not your people? They've gathered there to see you, or maybe you're part of another program. But how do you bridge that gap between the audience getting to know you and trusting you? What are some of the things that you do for that?
So I generally will start with, I would say, something that I know is going to pull at their heartstrings. I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of somebody's faith or background, we're all human, and there's a certain quest for unlocking something that's inside of us. I mean, a very powerful story that I've shared and, pulls at people when I just think about helping people realize the value of every day as kind of a launching pad a little bit is this fellow who was in his 90s who had COVID a number of summers ago, and he was in Italy, and unfortunately he had to be on a ventilator. I don't know if you heard the story or no. You heard the story?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. He was on a ventilator for a number of months. Thank God he recovered. And on his way out of the hospital, he was given the bill for a ventilator for 1 day. And he started to cry. And the doctor turned to him and said, "Are you crying because you don't have enough money to pay for the ventilator for 1 day?" He said, "I have all the money needed to pay." He said, "I've been breathing God's air for free for 95 years, and now I know how much 1 day's breath is worth."
Wow.
When somebody hears a story like that, and they think about what we went through and how every day is truly a gift, it touches people. And then people say, "Look, I want to live with that awareness on it. How do I do that?" And so I share stories. I share, some of the stuff in my book. I'm always open. I mean, stories to me. I mean, this past Sunday, I've used this story just a couple times already. I was, even developing the notion of gratitude. So I did a funeral for a 97-year-old man a week ago, and his grandson got up and he's talking about how his grandfather was extremely grateful. He always, he said that my grandfather, I asked him to speak at the rehearsal dinner for my wedding for 5 minutes. And he was going on and on. He says, "I'm grateful I can open up my eyes. I'm grateful that I can eat this food. I'm grateful." And then he says, I asked my grandfather multiple times, "What's the secret sauce of leading a long life?" My grandfather says, "Every night I open up the Bible and I read a verse. And then I count things that I'm grateful for in my life. And I fall asleep every time because I never run out of things to be grateful for."
Hey there, program directors. Are you tired of the same old lecture programs that feel more like a snooze fest than a stimulating discussion? Well, have I got news for you. Picture this: an event filled with laughter, inspiration, and invaluable insights straight from the mouths of over 60 congregational leaders. That's right, we're talking about a lecture that dives deep into the art of crafting and delivering sermons, packed with incredible stories, hilarious jokes, and public speaking techniques that I've gleaned from my interviews with over 60 of the best pulpit rabbis and public speakers today. But hold on, this isn't your typical scholar-in-residence affair. No, this is a dynamic fusion of stand-up comedy, Jewish history, and pulpit wisdom from over 60 rabbis that promises to keep the audience engaged from start to finish. So, if you're ready to experience the most inspirational, educational, and downright entertaining lecture you'll attend at your shul, JCC, or other Jewish institution, then you need to email Daniel at maggidmethod.com pronto. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on this opportunity to put on a one-of-a-kind event. Email Daniel at maggidmethod.com for availability and booking information. This is one program your members won't soon forget. Email Daniel at maggidmethod.com. Now back to the program.
So I talk about that. So I find the stories and the human stuff gets me in. And, obviously it's interesting when I talk to Jewish audiences and non-Jewish audiences, but it's really just a mix of stories and strategies. And, I will quote, even among non-Jewish audiences, stories from the Torah, not heavy duty ones, but people, these are real stories that teach us messages. So that's kind of usually my strategy.
You look for the common thread of humanity and use that as your
100%. And the yearning that people have to lead a life that is less encumbered by the negativity that they hear every day. I mean, everybody gets that. Like, our minds are being filled with all this negative stuff, with despair, with anxiety. And I try to help people tune out the outside world so they can listen more deeply to the inner voice that's inside of them, things that they will do that they'll be proud of, that will make a difference in their life. So that's something that I think people are looking for even more today. So, I always will start and say to people, generally, look, I'm here. I will try to set the tone. I've done this a few times. Like, look, I'm here for a reason. You're here for a reason. And we have the opportunity to spend the next 30 minutes together. And I'm going to talk from my heart. I hope it goes into your heart. And I want these next 30 minutes to matter. I just ask you to take a deep breath and open up your heart. And people generally will put your phones down, and I connect with people that way.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the phones, because obviously you don't have to deal with them. Well, maybe you do on a regular Shabbos, because you say you do have a kind of a mix of them.
Yeah, but people generally know not to bring it into the shul if they have it, or to turn it off.
Yeah. But when you're speaking on weekdays or you're speaking in front of secular audiences, how do you battle distractions like that?
When I'm giving a talk or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I don't really generally tell people. If I'm at a funeral, I tell people put their phones away or put them off. But if I'm doing motivational talk, I mean, look, I understand that people have things going on. I have no idea what's going on in somebody else's life. Maybe their wife is expecting. I don't know. So I don't try to say you have to turn off your phone, but it may be that I model it myself is usually the best way. I'm just going to turn my phone off so I'm not distracted when I'm talking to you. That's like a very subtle way of saying, well, if he's turning his phone off, maybe I should turn my phone off. That's about the extent of it.
And do you find that attention spans, you've been a rabbi for a long time, do you find attention spans are going down?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I think you have less time to capture people's attention and to hold them. I think the Zoom has been great because you can communicate with people, but you never know on Zoom. It's hard to know if people are really there just because they could be doing multiple things at the same time. So I find it hard to connect with people virtually, harder to connect virtually than from in person. At the same time, there's a trade-off. Virtually, you can connect with a lot more people sometimes than if you were doing it in person. So you try to do both, but yeah, there's no question that people are more distracted today. But I also think actually people are hungrier today than they might have been 20 years ago for the kind of messages that people are anxious to hear.
Interesting. Let me ask you about, I read a review of one of your books, I think this one was the what will they say about you when you're gone?
Yep.
So the review, it said the following thing. It said,
You did your homework. I'm impressed.
yeah, yeah, I tried to. So it said, how often do you get a book by a rabbi that isn't just sermons or a self-help book that isn't just fluff? This book melds the two perfectly. And I wanted to talk to you about how you balance, you seem surprised. Uh,
No, but I think I read that at some point, but go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's to me that's the epitome of a successful presentation where you're balancing substance and heart. We're people of the book. We have a lot of we're anchored to text and sometimes things can veer off into the area of sophistication and you can lose the heart. And then sometimes you can swing over on the other side of the pendulum and have so much heart that you lose the substance. And I'd love to hear about how you balance that proportion. Is it intuitive?
I think it's a little, I mean, it is, it goes back to what I was saying before in terms of my general like model a little bit, which is I think it's important that there is some basis in text for me to get up. And even when I was writing my book, just to tell stories and strategies without rooting it in some sort of North Star or wisdom, whatever that is, I think actually at the end of the day, I'm missing an opportunity to anchor what I'm saying. At the same time, I think sometimes we overestimate how much anchoring we need to do. Like if I'm drawing, there are multiple sources, for example, in any Dvar Torah that can substantiate what I'm saying. But this isn't a sheer, it's a drasha. It's a motivational talk. So I can give one source and delve into a little bit, but then immediately pivot to the story and inspiration and the strategy. It's a way for people to feel they're getting both. And I don't think that we shouldn't underestimate our audience. They don't need like 5 proofs that time is valuable. But one proof about what it means, Yaakov at the end of his life, where it says it wasn't that his years were coming to an end, but it says his days were coming to an end. And the Or HaChaim quotes a Kabbalistic idea that we have a spark for every day. And our role every day is to reveal the light in that spark, and then it goes back. That's a source. I'll move on after that, you know what I'm saying? And then like share a story. How is that amplified? I think that's what people want, So I think I do try to make sure there's an anchor, but basically just rely upon one and then move to and by the way, for that matter, people don't need 5 stories about one point. You have 1 or 2 stories in a strategy. That's what I'm saying. Like make it tight so that they know where you started, where you are, where you're going. And then I think Rav Lichtenstein would do this oftentimes, I mean, I didn't always understand everything in his shir, but he was obviously masterful. And certainly the way he uses words is masterful when you read. But you need a review from everybody, what you said, again, without going through it. And it's important to remember what Yaakov experienced at the end of his life. And that every day is a spark. And to kind of carry that forward. So they, in their minds, know what you said, where you went, and what you're trying to help them, what you want the takeaway to be.
Yeah. How important is it to you that people act on what you say?
Look, at the end of the day, I mean, this is something also that I think about. I want there to be something practical for most things that I say, at least where there maybe, look, sometimes you're just there to give people a new perspective on something. But I also think that the way that we affect change, actions affect emotions. That Sefer Chinuch talks about that. So I'm certainly not holding people generally accountable. Every once in a while, I'll say, like, who's going to commit to doing X, Y, and Z? Raise your hand. Every once in a while, I'll do that. But I want them to do something, practical to transform themselves. Like what you talked about at the very beginning. At the end of the day, it went in one ear and it was good, like popcorn or good food for, it was nice. The rabbi talked. What did he talk about? Well, he talked about 10 minutes. What did he say? Well, I don't really remember. Then I'm missing something. I didn't do something right. But if I can give them something to remember, I'll give you an example. So again, the whole theme of gratitude. This is like a very powerful story. So a woman comes to me, A woman comes to me, she's in her 40s, and we're talking about gratitude. She's like, I got to tell you a story, Rabbi. She said, when I was 20 years old, I went to go get a manicure. And the person who was doing the manicure noticed that I had a little bump on my hand. And she said that I should get the bump checked out. Well, as it turns out, I went to my doctor. The doctor said there's some cancer here. There's some tumor or something that has to be removed. My doctor did the surgery. Before the surgery, the doctor said to me, I want you to know that if this surgery doesn't go well, you won't be able to move the fingers on your hand. And thank God the surgery went well. She said that was when I was 20 years old. Now I'm in my 40s. And every morning when I wake up in the morning and I say Modeh Ani, I count it. I go Modeh Ani lefanecha melachai v'kayam shchazarti. So I am grateful that I can move my fingers. I said, how about if we all try that every morning? It's easy in the moment when the surgery goes well to give gratitude, but what's your tool to maintain that? So if I can give people a story like that, and make them think about that one thing, then, I know that it's really resonated. And you never know. I mean, that's the other thing. We always put things out. We never know who's going to touch. That's, by the way, also one of the challenges of Rabbi. You don't know, sometimes how much feedback do you get? It's not a lot. It's not like people are like coming to you afterwards say, every once in a while, that was a really good Dvar Torah or whatever. It's nice. But, if I feel good about it, and more importantly, if my wife feels good about it, then I feel good about it. And like people will come to me or anybody years later and say, I remember what you said. And I'll say to them like, yeah, remind me of what I said. So I want people to remember, but at the end of the day, it's I can't evaluate the success based upon what they're going to do or what they're going to remember. I just have to put it out there.
Yeah. Talk to me about how much of your personal life that you share when you're speaking, whether it's with the Kehillah or in other settings. How much of your own personal challenges, struggles, hopes, dreams, aspirations, how much do you share with the audience?
I mean, I definitely am personal with people. Like, I mean, not, I've like obviously, I mean, I guess a couple things to bear in mind. There are different layers that we reveal to people. In that same conference that I talked about, where I thought about the notion of like where I want to be 10 years down the road, one of the things they did there is they made us do an art project to basically in some way concretize like who we are. Like they gave us a little box, they gave us paint, they gave us clay, and they wanted us to think about life in a creative way. So one of the things that I did there was I made these clay things of like two hearts. Because I'm a big believer in the statement of the Talmud that says what comes from the heart goes into the heart. But also that, this is something Zig Ziglar talks about and others, like if I open up my heart to people about what my dreams and aspirations are, it's more likely I'll get where I want to go because now I have partners with me than if I hold it inside. So I do have people that are, I would say, strong stakeholders in my overall career, care about me. And for those people, I'll probably go pretty deep. Not as deep as I would, of course, with my wife or something like that, but I open up. I'm not going to share that sort of stuff in front of hundreds of people, but I will open up about struggles, obviously, which I do a lot when it comes to grief and transcending that grief as it relates to my mom. Talks about the challenge of just raising children, of balancing work and life, of being focused. I remember once, and I think I wrote about this once, like, we talk to people. I've struggled with this, and it's embarrassing where you ask somebody how they're doing, and they say to you something like, somebody in the family is sick, and you say, that's great. And then you catch yourself and say, what do you mean? Do you know what the person just said to you? Like we're on autopilot. I'll admit that, like I'll open up because people say, the rabbi, he's human too. Like he struggles with those things. Or do I always make a bracha? Like, am I always really mindful when I eat? Not as much as I should, I'm not like, do I every time feel like so I'll reflect back on my own struggles as a way to connect with people with their struggles too. I wasn't born with the name rabbi when I was a 1 year old. And that's not actually, it's what I do, but it's not who I am. There are different dimensions to my life. So I do try to open up.
Yeah. I'm curious about technique, just strict technique in terms of, let's say, storytelling. Is there anything that you can kind of point to and say, this is the way I do it that's successful for me, effective techniques?
Yeah, I would say get to your point pretty quickly. In other words, like sometimes make the story your own. And what I mean by that is like if you have a good story, don't read it. Just think about in your mind how you can retell that story as opposed to telling it the way somebody else told it. That I found helps. It helps keep it tighter, and it also helps make it more real for people. The other thing I would say is ask yourself, you can hear a lot of good stories, but what does it have to do with what you want people to remember when you leave? If it actually is a nice story, but it's not really helpful in getting people to remember what the essence of your sermon is, then don't say it. I mean, that's, by the way, a challenge sometimes. It's a challenge like to not to say things. There's a lot of good things we say, but you're not here just to like talk and talk and talk, because then at the end of the day, your message is diffuse. So make sure it really supports what you're saying. I would also say the placement of stories is important. Think about like you have a choice, and I think about this too, like giving a drasha. It's like you're singing a song, you know what I'm saying, and where the chorus is and where the notes are and like where the memory lines are. I spend time really thinking about how am I using words in the essence of a story. Like there could be a punchline in a story, and don't waste it. Like think about where you're going to use it in your drasha so it has the most impact.
Yeah. Do you move around when you're giving a talk? Well, let's say a Drasha in shul. Do you stand behind the pulpit, or do you move around?
I move around a little bit. Like I stand behind, I'm not like standing like this, but I also recognize that I have a pretty large space that I'm speaking to. So I can't like, I try not to migrate to one side or the other too much because then it's harder for people to hear when I'm like walking around back and forth. So I'm usually within about, I don't know, 5 to 10 feet, like in a certain zone a little bit. Sometimes I'll walk out if I have a message that I want to really get to people. I try not to do it too often, but like I'll come out from behind it, maybe walk down the steps and just like connect with people that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about some people talk about like hand gestures and different things that for effect? Is there? I know a lot of this for many speakers is intuitive, but if you can go back and think about how your body posturing and things like that, is there a thought that goes into it at all? Or
Um, it's mostly intuitive. I mean, I would say I try not to talk too much with my hands. In other words, where I don't want people to be distracted again. It comes from the message. So if my hands are like all over the place, it's like I also don't want to become a caricature of myself. Like every time the rabbi gets up and talks, he's like moving his hands all over. If it's serious, maybe I'll move my hands. But I want the words and the intonation and the way I speak to kind of move people that way. I certainly don't bang the pulpit. I'm not like stuff like that. I also am very careful not to point. Like certainly not pointing to people. Um, but like I guess like I move my hands a little bit like this, but I'm not like I don't want to become overly dramatic. That's something also that I try to like it's got to be real. Like people have to feel you're talking to, you're not acting. You're not like, like it's not a show. You're just talking to them. And so I try to use my hands the way I would use my hands actually when I'm talking to somebody, limited with effect, but not to overly dramatize in any way, because then it just becomes like too much.
yeah. Okay, so I'm thinking this will probably be the last question because you covered so many things. I have to truncate my questions because you cover so much with your answers, which is fantastic. Uh,
Uh,
so the question I wanted to ask you was, in terms of couple pieces of advice that you would give to an emerging rabbi who's embarking on a speaking career, what are if you had to Maimed alachas, or a couple, maybe two or three pieces of advice, as they head out onto their journey, what would you give them?
Before you think about I would say, what you want to say. It's important to ask yourself what people want to hear. Like, what do they need? In other words, don't start from a place like, I want to tell them this, I want to tell them that. Like, every congregation is different, communities are different. Before you speak at a place for the first time, it's important to ask whoever invited you to speak, like, what would you consider to be successful? What do you think? What's on people's minds and hearts? So that, I think, is important, to listen to where the community is at. The second thing is really make sure that when you speak, you are very well organized in your mind as to what you want them to remember. And anything that's not related to what you want them to remember, don't say it. And the third thing is that make sure you're really speaking like you're speaking not to them or at them, but like you're speaking from the heart, like you care about that what you're saying is important, and make sure that it really means something to you what you're saying. Giving a drasha is not just giving them some Torah on a silver platter. It's connecting with people. So make sure that what you say really comes from your heart. And if it doesn't, and you don't think it resonates with you, don't say it. Find something else that moves you. And I guess the last thing is that, call somebody up. There's nothing wrong with, like, using your friends, peers, or stuff like that. I'm happy every once in a while I'll get phone calls, and I keep my eyes open and ears open all the time, and people will post on WhatsApp groups. That's good. Those are good resources. So use your resources to try to find different ideas and then make it your own.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This is really, really good.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
For all you do.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. I hope you're finding value in all the insightful conversations coming your way, and I'm grateful for all the time we get to spend together. Now, I have a small favor to ask, one that can make a big difference. Your feedback is invaluable to me. By taking a moment to rate and review this podcast, you're not only showing your support, but also helping it reach new heights. Picture this: more reviews means more visibility. More visibility means more incredible guests lining up to share their stories and expertise with you. So, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, how about making some magic happen? Scroll down, tap that rating, jot down a few words. It's that simple. Your action today can pave the way for even greater experiences tomorrow. Thanks for your support.